Okay, Rich. The last theorem in section 10.5 is theorem 10.13, and it deals with angles outside the circle. So it's called the angles outside the circle theorem. Okay, and what do we mean by angles outside the circle? Well, there are three cases. Okay, so these vertical lines here just demarcate, they split up the screen into three cases, and I'm going to go through each one. I've called this a case A, case B, and case C. Okay, the reason there are three different cases is because the line segments that produce the angle can either be a secant, meaning, you know what a secant is? Something that actually cuts through the circle in two places. That is, a secant contains a chord, for example. Okay, that's the, a chord is necessarily part of a secant. Okay, so a secant, or so each of those lines could be either a secant or a tangent. So one case is when you have the angle, like angle 1 here, made up of a secant and a tangent. So you have that case. Okay, the second case is when you have the angle 2 in this case, made up of two line segments that are both tangents. Okay, you see the tangents to the circle. And then the third case, case C, is when the two line segments that form the angle, like angle 3 in this case, when those two lines are secant. They're both secant. That's a secant, and that's also a secant. Okay, in all cases the formula is the same. You're going to look for the two arcs that are intercepted by the angle you're talking about. So angle 1 intercepts what two arcs? This arc and this arc. Okay, angle 1 intercepts two arcs. Okay, this arc in green and this arc in blue. In this case, angle 2 intersects what two arcs? This arc in green and this arc in blue. Here, angle 3 intersects what two arcs? This arc in green and this arc in blue. And in all cases, the theorem says, even though there are three separate cases, but the theorem says the same thing. The measure of the angle is the measure of the bigger arc minus the measure of the smaller arc divided by 2. Actually, it's more like, rather than bigger or smaller, maybe it's better we just say this number cannot be negative. So when you are working your problem, put whichever one is bigger first. Okay, it cannot be negative. So if measure of xy is bigger than measure of wz, then that's the smaller one you subtract from the bigger one. Just put it that way. Okay, but basically you're looking for two arcs. Remember in theorem 10.12 we were also dealing with two arcs, right? But in there we were adding them up. We were adding them up and so on, but here we subtract them. So anyway, remember that when you're outside of the circle, it's different from when the angle you're talking about is outside, is different from when it's inside, like the one we did last with the chords. Okay, the chords intersecting inside. Anyway, that's all of sections 10.4 and 10.5. I think you need to work a few problems here and there to prepare for your quiz, and like I said, call me later tonight. Okay.